Hey everybody, welcome to Run the Nation right here, TYT Nation. I'm your host, Jeff Waldorf. Welcome to the show. We got a great Thursday show for you guys. We're going to start out a little bit of fun, then we'll go into some serious stuff, as we normally do. Breakdown for the day, and you're going to love this. NASA is hiring someone to defend us against aliens. You're going to love that segment. So that's our fun story. Anthony Scaramucci, what's going to happen with him? Where's he going? I've got the story on that one. Then, of course, we have some disastrous Democratic Party news. President Obama is weighing in on 2020, and he has a pick. Oh, boy. That's going to be interesting. Then, of course, we have Republicans that are trying to destroy a very important program for poor people. Surprise, surprise. I'll go through and talk about that. And then we've got Stephen Miller and Trump's new immigration proposal. I want to talk about that because actually I think that there are some points, and I know this is going to sound crazy, where Stephen Miller is actually right, at least when it comes to facts. But not on the policy responding to those facts. So I'm going to talk about that. Very interesting stuff here today. So, but before I get into the stories themselves, I, of course, want to thank everybody for joining us in this live stream. Please like and share. Share it around all your friends, family, whatever, Facebook pages, all that stuff, if you could. And make sure, of course, to contact me on social media for comments, questions, all that stuff. Use the hashtag TYTNation if you want to get in contact with me. And there's also another way, of course, in YouTube. There's a super chat. Make a super chat comment, and I will read it on air. So super chat's kind of awesome. Totally suggest using it. So, but, you know, if you don't want to use it for your on Twitter or something like that, then you can tweet me hashtag TYTNation, and I will read those tweets as well. All right. Anyway, that said, also want to thank the patrons, patreon.com/TYTNation. Let's do some patron shout outs here. Let's go from where we left off yesterday. If I can remember where that was. Like I said, it's, I believe I left off on, not there. Yeah, I should have prepared ahead of time. What am I going to do? Okay. We have, Lelaine Williams, Nicholas S. Garjanik, Jeff Curry, Hollis Hopkins, Alvin Berger, Julian Davis, Sherry Ward, Mike Samuel, Miriam Powell, Katz with a Z, and Simone Muntweiler. Then we have Jamie Miller, Dwayne Hendricks, Judith Hilton Coburn, Jorge Alvarez, Mark Andre Furland, Jeff Smith, Monica Flores, Kyle Herberts, Ramon Rodriguez, Ramona Lewis, Julio, IB Coliosho, Katrina Coffey with a K, Dr. T, George Bissett, Seth Baker, Roger Holden, Aaron, Kay Jordan, Tom Anderson, and Christopher Gear. So thank you to everybody, all those patrons who help continue to keep the show going and growing. You guys are awesome. You're amazing, and thank you very, very much. All right. With that out of the way, let's get to the show. Let's have a little fun, and then we'll get a little serious. Let's talk about aliens. I think you'll like this. All right. NASA has a new position. Let me start that again. NASA has a new position available, and it involves protecting the Earth from aliens. According to job listing, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration is currently looking for someone with security clearance to ensure that alien life or organic constituent and biological contamination does not make its way back to Earth via spaceship. Now, I'm thinking the person who probably put this job listing up might have been watching the movie Life. Just saying. Now, this person hired would be responsible for the leadership of NASA's planetary protection capability, maintenance of planetary protection policies, and oversight of their implementation by NASA's spaceflight missions. So, according to the job listing, candidates must have advanced knowledge of planetary protection. I'm not quite sure what that means, but okay. Experience overseeing nationally significant space programs, and have demonstrated skills in diplomacy that resulted in win-win solutions during extremely difficult and complex multilateral discussion. You mean like first contact discussion? Fascinating. Requirements also include frequent travel. Now look, I'm having some fun with this. Like frequent travel, like warp travel, space travel. That'd be kind of cool. Hey, you know what? Based on these requirements, I know the perfect person for the job who doesn't possess some of these requirements, but you know what? I think he's a shoo-in anyway. In fact, here he is talking about his passion for protecting humanity from alien species.
It is an alien force, not of this world, attacking humanity like the Bible and every other ancient text says. It's not of this world. I don't know exactly what it is or what it's doing, but this is not human intelligence, okay? It's not human intelligence we're under attack. Everybody's under attack.
How many of you knew I was going to go to that clip? I'm sure some of you knew. No, seriously though, I actually do think that this might be an important job. Now, do I believe in aliens? Yeah, absolutely. Now, I don't think that we found them yet, and I certainly don't think that they've visited Earth, and frankly, I don't think they know we even exist. You think a technologically advanced species would be interested at all on Earth? No, they'd find us, I think, in my opinion, a backwater hole. I mean, seriously, we fight each other over the remains of dead dinosaurs. Ridiculous. Ridiculous. Any alien species is going to look at that and be like, man, that race is super dumb. We have cheap, free energy from the sun. Why are they fighting over dead dinosaurs? I don't get it. But, yeah, well, you think that they can find something here that they can't find anywhere else? No, you find a bunch of stupid people. You find religion. I know, I'm terrible. No, as far as materials go, like, you think they're going to come here to strip mine and take all of our stuff? No. Like, asteroids actually have vastly more quantities of actual valuable resources than we have on Earth. I mean, you know, things like platinum and gold, all that kind of stuff, you can find in asteroids. So, again, it wouldn't make sense, right? And any species that can travel the vast quantities of space, or vast distances in space, can find those materials in vast quantities close to home. So again, no, I don't see it. But hey, look, it's not a bad idea to be prepared, I guess. But now, one more serious note on this. And again, I know we had some fun on this, but if you really wanted to protect the world, I don't really think you need to look towards aliens as a threat. We've got problems here that are actually much more significant and actually much more, prescient. It's like there's a big pressing problem right now. Things like climate change. You also have building antibiotic resistance, superbugs. You also have the problems with nuclear weapons. Look, there's a lot of things that threaten the Earth right now. I'm not saying that you shouldn't hire somebody to be prepared just in case the unthinkable happens, but also we need to focus on the problems that are already here. And unfortunately, the Trump administration is not. They seem to ignore climate change and ignore some of the problems that are facing humanity at this moment. So on the list of things that threaten us, that threaten Earth, aliens happen to be rather low. Just say. But anyway, so there's that. Just little fun little story here. So let's go to Stephen Miller. Let's get serious about immigration. Interestingly enough, when we just talked about aliens coming and visiting, let's talk about another kind of alien. All right. Now, President Trump recently announced his new plan to cut immigration in half. Not illegal immigration. They're not talking about illegal immigration. No, they're talking about legal immigration. So they're going after legal immigrants now. So yesterday, after Trump made his announcement, there was a briefing at the White House. Now, it wasn't with Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders, but actually with Stephen Miller, who's an architect of a lot of the Trump administration's anti-immigrant policies. Now, this press conference, a lot of people are focusing on how it got a little bit out of control, where you had Jim Acosta versus Stephen Miller, but there were other parts of it as well, where he was talking to Glenn Thrush about the immigration policies. Now, I want to show you a little bit of the fight between Acosta and Miller, and I want to talk about a few points that were in those videos. So let's take a look at that now.
What you're proposing, or what the president is proposing here, does not sound like it's in keeping with American tradition when it comes to immigration. The Statue of Liberty says, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses, yearning to breathe free." Doesn't say anything about speaking English or being able to be a computer programmer. Aren't you trying to change what it means to be an immigrant coming into this country? If you're telling them you have to speak English, can't people learn how to speak English when they get here?
Well, first of all, right now, it's a requirement that to be naturalized, you have to speak English. So the notion that speaking English wouldn't be a part of our immigration systems would be actually very ahistorical. Secondly, I don't want to get off into a whole thing about history here, but the Statue of Liberty is a symbol of liberty enlightening the world. It's a symbol of American liberty lighting the world. The poem that you're referring to that was added later is not actually part of the original Statue of Liberty, but more fundamentally, the history, but more fundamentally,
you're saying
that
that does not represent.
I'm saying that
what the
I'm saying that
country
the
has always
notion.
thought of
I'm
as
saying the notion that
immigration coming into this
I'm saying
country?
the notion.
Okay, so he talked about the poem, right? So that's what he mentioned, that, okay, the poem is ahistorical. Let's talk about history here. Now, he's actually correct about the poem. Now, the poem was added in 1883. Okay, so, look, he's right on one piece. But the point is that right now, it is there. It was added, and it was there to be a symbol for immigrants. Now, I think a lot of us now look at that poem as a guiding principle for immigration, that America is a land of opportunity for people who are marginalized by their home countries. Majorities in their home countries. For example, it kind of tracks to the original settlers to North America. Now, they fled from religious persecution. Can you think of another group that's fleeing from religious or political persecution? And of course, later on, those same settlers broke away from a king and founded a country. This country. Okay, so he's historically right on the poem, but I think he misses the point of the entire country. Now, I want to show you another video here, and then I want to go and rebut those points. So let's take a look at that.
In 1970, when we let in 300,000 people a year, was that violating or not violating the Statue of Liberty law of the land? In the 1990s, when it was 500,000 a year, was it violating or not violating the Statue of Liberty law of the land?
Was it violating?
When it was 700,000 a year. No, tell me what years. Tell me what years. Tell me what years meet. Tell me what years meet Jim Acosta's definition of the Statue of Liberty poem law of the land. So you're saying 1 million a year is the Statue of Liberty number. 900,000 violates it, 800,000 violates it.
You're sort of bringing a
Jim.
press one for English philosophy here to
Jim.
immigration, and that's never
For
been
Jim.
what the United States has been about, Steve.
That
I mean,
you're,
that's
but
just
you're
the
also
case.
your statement's also shockingly ahistorical in another respect too, which is if you look at the history of immigration, it's actually ebbed and flowed.
Okay, so again, he's trying to make a point. Where, well, you know, the immigration it ebbs and flows and everything, and we've actually kept people out. Again, when you're looking at history, that's actually true. When it comes to America, and you know, I hate to burst a bubble, but we've actually been incredibly exclusionary. That's not to excuse the policy. I think the policy is wrong, but we have to avoid whitewashing what we've actually done in history. I mean, and look, American history is full of us keeping out certain types of people. For example, the Chinese in the mid-1800s, right? You also had the Japanese in the early 1900s. They were denied citizenship. And then, of course, we had the Immigration Act of 1924, or otherwise known as the Johnson-Reed Act. Now, that specific act limited the number of immigrants who could be admitted from any country to 2% of the number of people from that country who were already living in the United States in 1890. And we have law after law, over and over again, that would restrict people from Southern and Eastern Europe, would restrict from Asian and East India. So, look, when it comes down to it, that plaque, I don't think we've ever deserved that plaque. It's not that we shouldn't follow that. As Stephen Miller suggests, is that we've never really earned that plaque. We have been exclusionary and discriminatory for a long time. I don't think he's correct, but again, I don't think we've done anything to earn that plaque. So now people like Stephen Miller, Donald Trump, Steve Bannon, they're deeply, deeply wrong on principle. But let's not pretend that America has been this country that has welcomed everyone with open arms, and that under the Trump administration that this has suddenly changed. We've always been people that have tried to keep other people out for no reason other than their race. We've always had racist, reactionary laws against certain groups of people, even refugees. For example, there was a group of Jewish refugees that were fleeing the Nazis. We turned them away, and they were certainly, they had to return to Europe, and they were killed. They almost certainly were killed under the Nazis. So we should not whitewash our own history. Instead, we should learn from it. Now, what lesson should we learn from this? Well, obviously that people like Miller are wrong when it comes to the negative effects of immigration. Now, later on in that interview, or on that press conference, he starts arguing with Glenn Thrush. Now, he makes the argument, and the crux of his argument is based on the idea that we need to make these immigration laws because they're hurting American workers. In fact, they're hurting low-skilled workers. This is what he said. He said, you've seen over time, as a result of this historic flow of unskilled immigration, a shift of wealth from the working class to wealthier corporations and businesses. And it's been very unfair for the American worker, but especially for immigrant workers, African American workers, and Hispanic workers, and blue-collar workers in general across the country. So you see what he's using there. He's using sort of this populist working class rhetoric to say, oh, look at what we're doing with this policy. We're actually hurting the working class. Now, some of the working class, let's be honest, they'll look at that and go, yeah, no, totally, yeah, that's what's happening to our jobs. Now, that's not factually correct, but people who are, rather busy working 2 jobs or not paying attention to politics, low information voters, they'll look at that and they'll be like, yeah, that must be why our wages are down. That must be why, I can't get good jobs anymore. We're going to blame the immigrant. So it goes down to Donald Trump's sort of strategy of pitting 2 sides against each other. Now, that's wrong, right? Now, and look, don't get me wrong, immigration does have an effect on the workforce, but it doesn't tell the whole story, okay? He doesn't tell the whole story. Like, a lot of people, though, think the immigrants have displaced them. It's been a common theme. The immigrants are coming, they're stealing our jobs. It's not true. Now, as I'm about to show you here, that whole rhetorical device that they're using, that rhetoric, is incorrect. So there's been some research into this, okay? There's a 2015 paper by a trio of researchers had found a link between more immigration and income inequality. However, that's a correlation, not causation. And immigration, it turns out that they found in this paper, is not a primary driver of income inequality. There's a graph that was created by those same researchers, makes it clear that the inequality, as measured with the Gini coefficient, would be nearly as high without the effects of immigration. The effect of immigrants, they say in the research, is, quote, modest. So look, unskilled foreign workers do have an impact on jobs and income inequality, of course. But the fact that we have such high income inequality is far more the fault of other factors than immigration. For example, you've got stagnating wages, loss of union power, terrible, trade deals, and anti-worker legislation like right to work. So, and look, think about the jobs that immigrants do. Well, some of them, actually a lot of them, come over and create small businesses. Or they also do jobs that immigrants can't. For example, there's a big demand for people who speak more than one language. This guy talks about, English, right? Need to make English the primary language. Anybody who comes over here has to know English. Well, there's actually a really big demand for people who are bilingual. That's actually very helpful to corporations. Now, because, of course, a lot of companies do business internationally. So it helps. Now, there's also the fact that immigrants do a lot of jobs that Americans don't want to do. For example, working in seafood, tourism, landscaping, construction, even for Trump, okay? And nobody wants to work for Trump. And other seasonal industries, right? Those companies have seen a flood in need for H-2B visas, specifically seasonal workers, right? Since they don't have enough American workers. Now, I know what I'm saying might seem a little crazy, but there are companies with jobs that Americans actually refuse to do. Just like when it comes to the illegal immigration debate, you have the farmers have this need for undocumented labor that will work for lower wages. It's not because Americans, are getting those jobs stolen. It's because Americans won't do those jobs. There were people that were offering $15 an hour to go and pick vegetables, and they still couldn't get enough American workers after they kicked out the immigrants to go and pick those vegetables. So there are jobs that Americans apparently are not interested in doing, which is amazing to me. But of course, everybody's got their price. But how far do you have to raise wages? And I'm in favor of raising wages in order to get an American to do some of these jobs. For example, like seafood packing, right? Now, in Virginia, they have some experience with this. There's a lot of companies in Virginia that do, seafood packing, shucking of crabs and all that stuff, and packing them. They've been trying to find American workers, and they just can't. And so they say, well, we can't find American workers, so we need to bring in people from overseas with these H-2B visas that'll actually work for us. Well, they couldn't find them. In fact, they couldn't find them in time. And since they couldn't find them, they're saying that lack of workers has led to at least one company shutting down an assembly line over the summer. So, wait. So if they could find workers, they wouldn't have to shut it down, right? So, yes, not only did shutting down that line, by the way, hurt the processing plant, but it also involved hurting workers that would do the hauling, packaging, and refrigerating of the seafood. So there's some issues here, okay? Now, for me personally, I think we should raise the wages, right? Instead of import workers, raise the wages to a point of where Americans will actually take those jobs. But until they do, they're relying on guest workers. Now, the problem is that a lot of people will look at that and they'll blame the guest workers instead of the companies for keeping those wages low. And if we did raise the wages, look, let's be honest, we will probably see a price increase of some of those goods. I don't mind that. I don't actually mind paying a few cents or even a couple bucks more if it means that somebody in America actually gets a good job at a good wage. I'm fine with that. But of course, not everybody's going to agree. But one thing that we shouldn't do is blame the workers that are willing to come in and do those jobs that nobody else, that Americans don't seem to want to be interested in doing. So now let's get to some more data that he references. And that is a recent study by George Borges. Now, Borges looked at the migration of more than 100,000 Cubans into Florida in 1980. He found that wages among the least educated workers in Miami dropped to 10 to 30% as a result of the influx. But wait, Borges' study was a direct rebuttal to a 1990 study by David Card, which found that there was virtually no effect of on wages or unemployment rates, even among the Cuban immigrant community that was already in the area. Borges' study itself was soon rebutted, as the National Review noted, which is not a liberal publication, by the way, with researchers pointing out that he didn't account for other demographic shifts in the area that may have had significant effect on wages. So again, he didn't look at all the data. Borges didn't, and look, they found that it had very little effect on employment and wages. Another study said that as much as $300 billion a year may be lost as a result of our current immigration system in terms of people drawing more public benefits than they're paying in. However, that is also misleading, especially since new immigrants can't actually draw unemployment benefits for 5 years. So that $300 billion, well, that is at the very high end. Now, estimates actually start at $43 billion in spending, and also adds that by the second generation, immigrant families are actually putting in an extra $30 billion a year into the social safety net system. So if you look at their arguments there, that, oh my God, immigrants hurt jobs and they're, that they hurt wages and they create income inequality, it kind of falls apart. That data doesn't back it up as far as having an impact on jobs and on economic inequality. So at most, immigration actually has a moderate effect on all of those. And on public spending, it's not nearly as drastic as the Stephen Millers and the Ann Coulters and the right wing want you to believe. And I think that's important. So I think policy-wise, I think it's fair to talk about H-1B and H-2B visas. That's fine. I mean, H-1Bs, for example, is where wealthy companies, well, they will look for overseas skilled labor. And they'll claim, oh my God, we just can't have these, we can't find these American workers that are highly skilled in computers in Silicon Valley. No, there are actually some very skilled workers. In fact, we have stories of people that are training their replacements that come from overseas. So I don't necessarily buy that argument. I think H-1Bs get abused, and also H-2Bs get abused. Trump is a perfect example of that. His company brought in 15,000 workers under the H-2B program. Why didn't you hire American? Oh, that's right. I think some Americans probably wouldn't want to work for Trump, but others would. So, look, it's fine to look at those policies, but what's not fine is to do what the Trump administration is currently doing. That's to blame and then ban immigrants from coming in simply because they're poor. They want to have their golden tickets, okay? What they want to do is they want to bring in rich people. Trump loves rich people, doesn't care where they're from. He loves the rich Saudis because they go and buy his apartments. But what he doesn't like is poor people. Again, it doesn't matter where they're from when it comes to him, but if you're poor and foreign, you are doubly fucked under the Trump administration. And it is not fair to ban those people simply for being poor. You never know who's going to be the next I can't think of his name now, founder of Apple. I'm blanking out today, but you know who I'm talking about, Steve Jobs. You never know who's going to be the next Steve Jobs. Or Steve Jobs' dad, who actually did come from Syria. So, look, I think it's a mistake. You're essentially blaming people for just trying to come in and trying to work and actually make a living. You're blaming them for the effects of actual corporate greed. And Miller and some of the Trump guys, well, they know they can get away with doing so in order to advance their own racist interests. So, and of course, the interests of the corporations themselves. All right. So there's that. Let's go to... Let's go to the Democrats. All right. Now, the 2020 election is still some time away, but already the Democratic Party is looking to find someone that they believe can challenge Trump. Well, I believe the choice is obvious on that. Why not go for the most popular politician in the country, which is Bernie Sanders? But the more establishment wing of the Democratic Party says, no, absolutely not. We're not going to go with the obvious choice. We're actually going to put up somebody else. So they're throwing out some names, and one of them, of course, we reported on is Kamala Harris. Then you also have Cory Booker. Then you also have Joe Biden, who's also incredibly popular, by the way. And the newest name is somebody close to the Obama administration. Now, Politico had reported on August 1st that Barack Obama and his inner circle are now urging former Massachusetts Governor Deval Patrick to run in 2020. Now, from that piece, they said Valerie Jarrett, Obama's close advisor and friend, says that President Patrick is, quote, what my heart desires. I'm going to disagree with that. Now, David Seamus, Obama's political director in the White House and now CEO of his foundation, also has some very friendly feelings towards Deval Patrick. He's also urged him to run. Again, another member of President Obama's inner circle. And then you have Obama himself saying, you know what, I think that'd be a good idea. You should probably run. In fact, at a conference earlier this year hosted by former White House Communications Director Anthony Scaramucci's hedge fund, that's an interesting connection, Valerie Jarrett said Patrick was her pick for president in 2020, as I said. So, look, he's got allies in the Obama administration. He's an Obama guy, and Obama's like, yeah, great. We'd love to see him run. And not only that, but his corporate allies also want to see Deval Patrick run. In fact, after he left office, Patrick became managing director of Mitt Romney's venture capital group, Bain Capital, and he has also worked at Texaco Oil Company and for Coca-Cola. So that's those are things that are going to complicate his run. Again, it's going to complicate his run because of President Obama himself had some harsh words for Bain Capital. When running against Romney, Obama said, and when you're the president, as opposed to the head of a private equity firm, your job is simply not to maximize profits. Your job is to figure out how everybody in the country has a fair shot. Your job is to think about those workers who get laid off and how to pay for their retraining. Your job is to think about how those communities can start creating new clusters so they can start attracting new businesses. Your job as president is to think about how we set up an equitable tax system so everybody is paying their fair share that allows us to invest in science and technology and infrastructure, all of which is going to help us grow. If your main argument for how to grow the economy is, I knew how to make a lot of money for investors, then you're missing what this job is about. It doesn't mean you weren't good at private equity, but that's not what my job is as president. So that is Barack Obama, going after Mitt Romney for heading Bain Capital. And here Obama is saying to a guy who runs Bain Capital, you should be president. That's a bit awkward. And look, to be fair, he was a former governor, but then again, Mitt Romney was also a former governor. And he put in Massachusetts Romney Care, which became the basis of Obamacare. Now, of course, look, they have different policy positions, obviously. I'm not equating Deval Patrick to Mitt Romney. What I'm asking here is it really smart to have someone run in 2020 in the Democratic ticket that is so close to Wall Street that he's running one of the companies that Mitt Romney had ran? Is that smart? Especially when there's a time when this is a time where people despise Wall Street and Wall Street greed. And look, one reason that a lot of people, I think, didn't like Hillary Clinton, not because she's a woman. Some of that, of course, but no, one of the reasons that at least I didn't like her is because she is very, very close to Wall Street. She gave Goldman Sachs speeches at $250,000 a speech. She's very, very close to Wall Street. And for that reason alone, a lot of people didn't trust that she would represent them. Okay? And look, it's important to have a person who you feel is going to represent the average working person, whether it be black or brown or Latino or white people in the Midwest. Working class is working class, and I wish that the pundits would include black people in the working class, because they are members of the working class. And when you raise wages for the working class, when you look out for the working class, black people benefit. When you give health care to everybody through Medicare for all, you're also helping black people and Latinos and Asians. You're also helping all of those groups. When you offer free college as a policy, which progressives are putting forward, that also helps African Americans, Latinos, and it helps minorities, okay? So, yes, they are members of the working class, and we don't need to separate them anymore. They are part of the working class, just like with the rest of us, okay? But anyway, look, as far as Hillary Clinton, look, I still preferred Hillary Clinton to Donald Trump, because it turns out Trump also loved Wall Street, filled his cabinet with Goldman Sachs, and has an open disdain for poor people. But at the same time, of course, we know that the establishment always serves their donors, whether it be Republicans or Democrats. They still serve their donors, okay? That doesn't mean the parties are the same on policies, but on things like tax cuts, Democrats tend to serve their donors rather faithfully on those issues. And look, Deval Patrick, Cory Booker, and Kamala Harris, I fear, would also serve the donors. For example, she had refused Harris when she was Attorney General of California. Got my states mixed up there. It's weird. When she was Attorney General, she didn't prosecute Steven Mnuchin's bank, One West, for doing massive fraud. And later on, oh, look at that, she received campaign contributions from Steven Mnuchin himself. So those are some of the questions that make progressives go, ooh, I don't know about that. I'm not sure about Harris. And then for Cory Booker, of course, you had the anti-marijuana vote. Not marijuana vote, I'm sorry. You had the anti-importing importing drugs from Canada. His stance on that, where he got a lot of money from the pharmaceutical industry, because, it's a big industry in New Jersey. He gets a lot of money in campaign contributions, so of course he's going to stick up for those industries that make lots and lots of money. And so he was, actually voted against provisions to go and import some of those cheaper drugs from Canada. So yeah, that's why we're a little cool on Cory Booker. Now, he did come around to the right side, and he's got this marijuana bill now that is legalize marijuana, but apparently there's some catches to that. Or there's a big caveat to it. So again, mixed bag, a little too close to Wall Street. There's not a lot of trust there because there isn't a proven record of fighting for the people. There's no trust there. So it's not about, oh, you're anti-woman or you're anti-black. I'm sure some of that plays into some people somewhere. But as far as progressives are concerned, there's no trust there because we've looked into their past and we're like, we're not sure if you're going to stand with us when you're in power. Because it seems like what you've been doing is bowing to the powerful. Progressives are against, we're against the power. We're fighting against the power. We're fighting against the establishment. Why would we back someone who's been backed by that establishment? So, no, we do not trust them. what we do need to do is we need to find somebody who's going to fight the banks, who's not going to take the PAC money, who's not going to represent the corporate establishment. Now, again, I'd like to see Bernie Sanders, but especially since he's the most popular politician in the country, but he might not go there. And if they don't go that route, what about Nina Turner? What about Tulsi Gabbard? There's a lot of other progressives, up-and-coming progressives within the Bernie Sanders progressive movement that are certainly viable. Now, ultimately, it doesn't come down to the face of who you put up, but the policies that you put up and the record, okay? What do they stand for? And unfortunately, I don't believe any of these establishment picks would rally behind and then follow through on progressive policies. Right now, there's just little trust there. And these policies, I mean, we know, like, the Democratic establishment, they're like, well, what do you want? We want unity. What's it gonna take to bring you into the party? Well, it's very simple. Medicare for all, free college, getting money out of politics, fighting for a living wage. These are the policies that we care about. These are the policies that we want you to fight for. Now, if you don't agree with those policies, then we're not going to be on your side. If you do agree with those policies, great. And some of the Democrats are coming around to it. But again, when you don't have a record that matches fighting for that, we're not just going to take you at your word. We have to see some action on this. And look, hey, luckily there is HR 676. Democrats in the House. You want us to support you? Well, support Medicare for All, John Conyers' bill. Or support the upcoming Bernie Sanders Medicare for All bill. Support, banking reform. Swear off taking PAC money. It's really easy what we want you to do. You don't have to change your values. In fact, you need to embrace progressive values, the values that you say you stand for. Embrace those values, and progressives will come to your side. Will come to your side. So, but look, that's my opinion on Patrick and all these other picks. I don't think it's a good idea. I think it's a terrible idea, but you should let me know in the comments what you think about this. Okay. I think we'll save the Scaramucci story for last. I want to go to an important program here. Nope. There we go. Now, Republicans are continuing their attack on poor people with a bill called the End Taxpayer-Funded Cell Phone Act. That obviously seems very, very clear in its intent to end taxpayer support of cell phones for the poor. Now, that legislation was recently announced by Republican representatives. Now, the bill itself goes after what they call the Lifeline program. Now, the Lifeline program actually allowed landline phones to be subsidized by the government. Now, President Obama expanded that. That's where you get Obama phones from, but actually this was started under President Ronald Reagan. Now, in addition to mobile phones, it also includes some basic broadband internet access. Now, the idea behind this, of course, was to allow low-income people to have access to cheap communications devices, especially since technology has progressed. And look, I know that there's a lot of pushback against this program. Again, you've got the Obama funds are giving all this free stuff. Well, you know what? I've actually known people who've had a Lifeline phone. Trust me, it's not like you're getting something that's top of the line here. You're not getting an iPhone. You're getting a $10 burner phone at best. The kind of phones that you find at a gas station. Okay, so, and look, some people might be like, well, if they're so cheap, Jeff, why don't they just buy them themselves? Why don't they use their own money? Well, because sometimes people can't afford a $10 phone plus minutes. And besides, if you want these people to get jobs, right? Well, what do you need to get a job? It helps to have a phone so you can get a call back from an employer. You can't just walk into a job or walk into a store, ask for a job, and then what? Have them not call you? That seems stupid. As far as the internet access goes, you can't walk into a place of employment that's hiring and fill out an application there. A lot of places will say, well, we don't have applications, go fill one out online. So that's where we're at here. So you kind of need a phone for a job callback, and you kind of need the internet to fill out a lot of applications. There are very few places now that actually take paper applications anymore. Again, a lot of it is online. So you need to have the resources to do that. And that's what this program helps with. And look, a lot of public libraries, for example, they do have internet, but some happen to charge you to use it. Not all of them, of course, but there are some that do charge you to use it. So yeah, the internet and phone to the Lifeline program, that actually makes sense and actually helps people be able to get jobs. Now, with that in mind, here's why Representative Scott, who brought this program out, who's trying to kill this program, this is the reason why he wants to kill it. He said, hardworking American taxpayers are already overburdened and should not be forced to pay for a program that is vastly expanded beyond its intended scope and is riddled with waste, fraud, and abuse. Waste, fraud, and abuse. So, hey man, did you expect anything different? The Republicans, they use that excuse for every government program. So, and also expanding it beyond its original purpose. Hey man, Reagan, Saint Reagan here, he said, okay, we'll throw you a bone and cover landlines. But now cell phones and internet access, oh my God, here we go. Expanded way beyond its original use. But you know, that law is very old, and they didn't have that technology in 1985. Things were actually a lot different in 1985. Again, you could just walk into a job and they would interview you and decide whether or not on the spot, whether they'd hire you or not. Oh, now it's a lot different. Now you need a phone for a callback. Now, again, you need the internet in order to fill out a lot of job applications. So it would make sense to change the policy, update the policy for the modern world. And Republicans look at that and go, oh my God, no. We are not going to update the policy. In fact, we're going to stay the original terms, which is landlines only. No Obama phones. None. Okay, anyway. Now, as for the taxpayer being overburdened part, I actually agree with that 100%. The working class and the middle class are actually being overburdened. When voters say, hey man, we're getting taxed left and right by the government, they're actually 100% correct. That's not because the government hates you and wants to take all your money. No, it's because the corporations and the wealthy don't pay their fair share of taxes. And when they don't pay their fair share, well, guess who ends up paying it? They shift that burden over to you. Corporations, they say that they pay 35%, but actually they don't pay anywhere near that thanks to tax loopholes, deductions, all sorts of gimmicks. You also have things like the investment tax at 15%, capital gains. That's the tax that I'm talking about, which taxes that capital gains income at 15%. That is a lower rate. So a lot of CEOs will take advantage of that and be like, well, I'm just going to take my compensation in the form of tax capital gains so I don't have to pay that 35% or 39%. So that's some of the reason that they get away with not paying their fair share. And again, that money ends up going to you. Like, you're going to have to pay that money because they can't. So yeah, if you're saying, hey man, I am overtaxed, you're absolutely right. But it's not programs like this that are doing it. And actually, this program doesn't have anything to do with taxes. Now, let me explain, but first, let's go to the waste, fraud, and abuse. Now, Scott continues. On June 29, 2017, the GAO released a report which detailed numerous instances of use and oversight gaps in the Lifeline program. In particular, the program's free cell phone plan. Among finds in the report, GAO investigators found that $1.2 million in cell phone subsidies went to fake or deceased individuals. Oh, no. And more than 36% of cell phone program subscribers, 1.2 million of 3.5 million, could not be verified. The ever-increasing fraud and ballooning cost to the taxpayer also puts a burden on cell phone service providers, driving up the cost for consumers and limiting the quality of service. So they're actually wrong about those last parts, But they're actually right about the report. The GAO did come out with a report, and the results were, of course, devastating when it comes to the program. Now, what's interesting, though, is that this whole program could be, or this whole problem could be avoided if the program had a little bit more oversight. According to the Washington Post, when government auditors posed as Lifeline applicants, approaching as many as 19 telecom carriers with false personal information, a dozen of the requests were approved, indicating that the companies who are responsible for verifying potential customer eligibility were not reliably screening out fraudulent applicants. So wait a minute. So the fraud here, right, is because the companies themselves are required to screen the applicants, and they weren't doing so. You let the companies take control of that. Hey, corporation, go ahead and screen your own applicants to this government program. It's okay. We'll leave it up to you. We're pretty sure that you can handle it. When you leave it up to the companies are going to obviously cut corners. They're going to be like, who cares? We're not going to look into it. It's not our money. We're not losing anything from this. In fact, we're gaining from this. So we're getting the subsidies. Oh, so here we go. So there's no oversight. Now, that's not the only thing that's wrong with Scott's assumption. Ars Technica also explained that while Representative Scott is saying this to protect consumers from having to pay taxes they shouldn't have to pay, there's actually nothing in his legislation that would actually save any taxpayer money whatsoever. That's because Lifeline is not funded by taxpayer money. It's actually funded by cell phone bill surcharges. Interesting. So no taxpayer money actually came out of that. It all has to do from surcharges added on by cell phone providers. Now, this bill would not return those surcharges to the consumer. So you would save no money. In fact, if they completely defund the program, this passes, right? And they defund the program, you're not going to save any more money as somebody who has a phone. You're still going to have to pay that surcharge. Well, where does that money go? Now, the bill would prohibit multiple phone providers and mobile data providers from receiving Lifeline funds. However, it wouldn't change the amount of money that is collected from the carriers in 2018. The bill says that excess collections that would no longer subsidize mobile service shall be deposited in the general fund of the Treasury of the United States for the sole purpose of deficit reduction. So you understand that? You're not going to save any more money as a taxpayer. You're not really paying anything at all in taxes. You're just getting charged extra by the phone companies. And instead of it going to actually helping people afford a phone so they can possibly get better jobs and get off welfare programs, that money's going to go to instead at deficit reduction. Essentially, let's screw over the poor and use that money to cover the deficits we created as Congress by our endless wars in the Middle East and giant tax cuts for the rich. Now, notice how Republicans, they never want to take responsibility for their massive spending programs when it comes to the military, when it comes to giant tax cuts. Now, look, they want to call Obamacare a huge driver of the deficit, but actually, Obamacare actually added money into the system through progressive taxation. So they were not, this was not a program that added to the deficit, that added to the debt. It actually reduced the deficit, as with a lot of progressive programs. Look, most of the programs that progressives put out and the Democratic Party puts out actually saves money. For example, free college tuition. People think, oh my God, no, that's going to cost trillions and trillions of dollars. But they forget that we already spend trillions and trillions of dollars, and a free college system would replace all the different, for example, grant programs, subsidies, tax breaks that colleges get, student loan program, and all that stuff. And not only that, but the government could use its leverage to help negotiate lower tuition prices for colleges, for students. It would actually be cheaper. There's been studies on this that say that if we completely gut our system right now when it comes to college affordability and institute a free college for all plan, That would save the government money, billions of dollars each year. Same deal with Medicare for all, right? You would replace the for-profit insurance industry with a single option, the government, which would, of course, eliminate all your subsidies. It would cut down on administrative waste, advertising costs, executive bonuses, all that stuff that government money goes into insurance companies, right? And it will also give the government leverage to negotiate drug prices and healthcare costs with the doctors and hospitals directly instead of going through third parties. Because right now, what we have is a multi-payer system. So, doctors get paid from a multitude of other sources, some of them government sources, some of them from your pocket. And again, the subsidies, tax breaks, and all this stuff going to the insurance companies, which have a profit motive. And so there is a definite reason for them to raise rates since they're getting some of this government money. So, look, programs like these would actually reduce the deficit and long-term debt through taxes and decreased spending on the different subsidies and bullshit that you would have to work through a market-based system. But see, Republicans, look, they want to talk about how they're the party of fiscal responsibility, right? How come that every time we've had a Republican president, they massively blow up the debt? Look, the last Republican president to balance the budget was Dwight Eisenhower. And this is the guy who warned us against the military-industrial complex. The modern Republican Party, and sadly the Democratic Party, love the military-industrial complex. They do all sorts of spending on the military. Look, we have a military budget of over $600 billion a year. That's absurdly expensive. Absurdly expensive. We cannot afford to do that. But somehow, while on the one hand saying we don't have enough money for healthcare to cover everybody, but we've got more than enough money for bombs on Syria. Missiles that cost millions and millions of dollars to launch. It's ridiculous. Not only that, but again, you're cutting taxes massively for the rich for, in the name of trickle-down economics. Well, let's see how that worked out. Let's, go to Kansas if you want to see how that worked out. It didn't. And then they give subsidies and tax breaks for their giant defense contractor buddies. And, of course, they get us into endless wars, which sadly, again, our Democratic establishment friends are more than happy to continue when they get elected. But my whole point is, it's not cell phone programs for the poor. As flawed as they are, and they could be fixed, and they should be fixed, that's not what's wrecking the taxpayer. What's wrecking the taxpayer is, unfortunately, neoliberal corporate establishment policies and Republican right-wing policies. Okay. One more here. Let's talk about the mooch. Now, Anthony Scaramucci was the former communications director for the Trump administration. In what has to be a record turnaround for someone in the White House, he was fired just after serving 10 days in his new role. So he's in, he's out, gone. All right. Now, a lot of people are wondering, hey, man, what happened? Oh, and not only that, but what's next for the mooch? Well, for that, I go to Vicky Ward of the Huffington Post. She recently not only spoke to Scaramucci, but she also spoke to Roger Stone. Now, Stone said that Scaramucci had reminded him of, quote, a suicide bomber. Oh, that's a bad analogy, man. No, that's terrible. Now, he also said, but this administration is a lot like the French Revolution. You never know who will be beheaded next. Oh, boy. Again, you know what? That's sort of an oddly apt comparison. Because there's been a lot of people getting the axe. Just saying. Now, in the same interview, Stone said that he didn't believe Scaramucci would stay far from the president for long. He said, as you know, none of us are ever really gone. He still has the president's cell phone, the president's private number. Just because he's not in the White House, no one should think his influence is gone. That's very interesting. So now, as you're about to see, Scaramucci does plan on actually making a comeback. Now, look, I didn't really get to talk about the reason that he was fired, so I'm actually going to expand on that now. It's not because he was doing a poor job. It's actually because I believe he was overshadowing the president. He was stealing the limelight. Now, that right there is number one offense in Trump world. Whether you're trying or not, if you take the spotlight from Donald Trump, well, you're done. And look, Scaramucci, he is a lot like Trump. He's got the mannerisms. He's got the New York accent going on. So, look, man, this guy, he gets on camera. He was actually hungry for the camera. So, very, very eager to go in front of the camera. And, again, if you do that in Trump world, he don't like that. Okay? Now, she writes that from the beginning of his time in the Trump White House, way back in July 20th, critics said Scaramucci was too similar to Trump. I also said that. Too eager to be on TV to last. Scaramucci was keenly aware of that particular liability. It explains why his opening news conference was so filled with compliments for the president. He knew that there was only one person watching whose opinion of him mattered. Now, Scaramucci told the Huffington Post reporter, quote, "The president thought I killed it," and said, "If you were 7 inches taller, I'd be worried." And that's according to someone who was familiar with the conversation, but who asked not to be named, quoting the president. So, look, early on, there were problems of Scaramucci, as I said, getting too much of the limelight. He was getting a little worried. Hell, man, if you were 7 inches taller, I'd be worried. No, actually, you were quite worried, especially since Scaramucci tends to draw some drama, okay? In fact, he was getting in a lot of trouble. Now, one of the examples of that is, of course, Ryan Lizza of The New Yorker tweeting out that Scaramucci was at a dinner with the president, First Lady, and Fox News host Sean Hannity, as well as former Fox News host or Fox News co-president Bill Shine. Now, Scaramucci, he said he was livid about the information being passed on to a reporter. For one thing, he said that guest list was incomplete. The tweets didn't mention the presence of Ashley Earnhardt and Brian Kilmeade, co-host of Fox and Friends, as well as the White House counselor Kellyanne Conway and Vice President Mike Pence, who he said left before the sit-down dinner. Now, something tells me that it's not really the fact that, oh, it's an incomplete guest list. No, I think there was more to it. For another, he knew that the full guest list also included Kimberly Guilfoyle, co-host of The Five on Fox News, and earlier that next morning, Olivia Newsy, of the New York Magazine confirmed that Guilfoyle was also there. Scaramucci realized that the inclusion of Guilfoyle would raise suspicion. Well, now why? Why would that raise suspicion? I haven't heard anything about this. He turns out that he said that he was aware that some associates and members of the media were gossiping about his friendship with the Fox host and feared this particular connection would only make matters worse. He said he took it as, quote, an attack. Well, that's very interesting. That's actually something that I didn't know, but at the same time, hardly relevant. But still, speculation that the mooch might have been having a little bit of a relationship with Guilfoyle. I guess people would look at that and be like, oh, scandalous, scandalous. But for me personally, I don't really care about people's relationships. Whatever. I don't give a shit. But, again, I guess I'm in the minority here when I don't actually give a shit again about who people are fucking or who people are dating or possibly dating. I don't really care. But anyway, add that to the speculation on top of the other issues. And look, that can easily put a huge spotlight on somebody. And that's something that Trump wants for himself and for his agenda. Now, another thing that hurt Scaramucci in that regard was the interview with Ryan Lizza. According to several sources to the White House, the president was initially amused by the Lizza exchange, but then changed his opinion when he saw how much negative attention it was bringing. Again, Trump right now, he's like, oh my God, negative attention. We do not need that negative attention. We already got the Russia thing. That's getting in the way. The Russia investigation. We got all these different scandals going on. We got all these different leaks. Now we got Anthony Scaramucci getting all this negative attention. Which, look, in the interview, like, I talked about that in that phone call. He said that Steve Bannon likes to suck his own cock. That's pretty inflammatory. And, of course, Reince Priebus was a paranoid schizophrenic. Yeah, that's going to cost him, that's going to get some eyeballs, okay? That's going to get some attention. All right. So, now Scaramucci, when he found out that Trump was pissed, he said he offered to resign before the weekend. Now, the president reportedly told him that that wouldn't be necessary, but he instructed Scaramucci to watch it in the future, according to someone familiar with the conversation. There's another mark against Scaramucci, and that is, of course, more stuff about his marital problems. Now, again, I don't like that. I don't think we should be involved in talking about people's marriages. I don't really care. It's none of my business. But again, some people are going to talk about it, and it's going to make negative headlines. It's going to make you look bad. So after all that came out, all that together, Scaramucci, he knew he was fucked. Especially when retired Marine General John Kelly came in as the new chief of staff. Now, he had insisted that all White House staff would report to him, and when he did, Kelly asked for Scaramucci's resignation. He said, quote, "It was a very polite conversation." Scaramucci then went to see Trump, who was unavailable. He ended up speaking with the president, his daughter Ivanka, and his son-in-law Jared Kushner separately later in the day by telephone. He said, "All were gracious. The president told me he knows I have his back, but he has to try and tighten the ship." Again, that's the reason that he brought on General John Kelly. Now, the White House, I don't know if you noticed, but it's a bit of a disaster. Sad. A little bit of a mess. So, now Kelly, I think he's the right kind of guy to try to bring order. Not because I agree with him politically. I don't know what he stands for. But this is a guy who admires order and structure. And right now, Trump needs order and structure in the White House. He's got none of that. And right for now, Donald Trump's actually let him do that. Now, I've mentioned before, I wonder how long that's going to last. How long he's going to let John Kelly go before he starts trying to undermine him. Because again, Trump likes to be his own chief of staff, but he does a terrible, terrible job of doing so. But again, that's a story for a different day. So now let's go to, since we know what led to Scaramucci, at least according to his words, getting the axe, they then asked him, "Okay, well, now that you're gone, what are you going to do next?" He said, quote, "I am now going to go dark." Whatever that means. Okay. And then he said, quote, "Then I will reemerge as me." What does that even mean? Aren't you already you? I don't quite understand, but okay, whatever, man. There it is. So he's going to go away. And then apparently he's going to come back moochier than ever. I don't know. But hey, man, he's telling you, you haven't seen the last of Mooch. I'm coming back. And look, let's be honest. He was incredibly loyal to Trump. And so I could definitely see him getting a less prominent position in the White House. One that doesn't involve him being in front of the camera. Because again, one of the biggest fears of Trump is somebody stealing the spotlight from him. So if they put him in a less prominent position where he doesn't get that exposure, where he's not the face of the administration, then I could definitely see him playing a role. Because there are plenty that are open. But this isn't the end of the mooch in government. But at least according to my opinion. But in the end, I guess we'll have to see. Okay. So that's it. That's all I got. Thank you for going around the nation with me today. Thank you to everybody who liked and shared this video. I forgot to... Oh, actually, you know what? Let me do some... a couple of tweets here. Remember to use the hashtag TYTNation. Let me answer something real quick. Raven Dawn had tweets out. I take it Jeff doesn't believe in aliens. I actually do. No. I do. I told you that I do. And I just don't believe that they visited Earth. I'm not entirely sure that whether or not they did, but I don't see any compelling evidence for it. I know I'm going to get a lot of Roswell guys going, no! Look, I love those alien stories. I'm certainly interested in it. But again, I don't see a lot of compelling scientific evidence or a lot of compelling proof. So, but I do believe that there are aliens. So, but anyway, thanks for sending that tweet. And of course, thanks for watching, of course. Now, let's see. One more thing. I was thinking I've got one more thing to announce, but apparently I do not. So, all right, guys. Thank you so much. Thanks to the patrons. We'll be back tomorrow. We'll have a great Friday show. Love you guys. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, TYT Nation. See you tomorrow.